Well, good afternoon and happy hump day to our church family, St. Stephen Church family. I'm Dr. Kevin B. James. I have the honor and privilege to serve you week after week as the minister of music here at St. Stephen Church. And this month, I have the opportunity to kick off a series of lessons that will pole vault us into Men's Month as we celebrate men all across our church and our nation. We have, I believe, 5 lessons in this series, and I'm going to be the initial one to kick everything off. After me, Reverend William Fortson will come and take you further in our study. And then Brother George Demery, our COO here at St. Stephen Church, will lead us in a lesson, followed by Reverend Corey Bailey, who is a part of our Indiana congregation, who is our leader of our Indiana congregation. And then one of the newest guys on our team, Reverend Kevin Adams, will close us out as we talk about this series. The series is called Frederick Douglass, A Prophet of Freedom. And the series is about heroes of our faith. In our first lesson today, I will just kind of set the tone for everything that will take place for the next 4 weeks. And so we're going to talk about what our lesson aim is, to acquaint the student with the enormity of this historical figure, Frederick Douglass, and to understand what he meant to America and why he still matters even in 2024. Carter G. Woodson said this: "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history." If you don't know where you come from, you sure can't decide how you're going to go where you need to go. Jeremiah 20:9 says in the New King James Version, "Then I said," this is Jeremiah speaking, "I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. But his word was in my heart, like a burning fire shut up in my bones. I was weary of holding it back, and I could not." In Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 18, in New King James Version, it says, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord," and that's capital Lord, Lord God, "the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this." And in Isaiah 46:9 and verse 10, it says, "Remember the former things of old." We're still talking about history. "Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose." We read in Psalm 105, verse 1, New King James Version, "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples." And then in Esther chapter 4, verse 14, in New King James Version, here's what we hear being said to Vashti. It's Esther. "For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." And then in Acts 7, Stephen, who our church is named after, recounted the history of the Jewish people and acknowledged biographies and heroes of the faith. Listen to this quote from Nikole Hannah-Jones. "Frederick Douglass was the greatest American this country ever produced. He was the single most influential African American in U.S. history. By far, he was the tallest tree in the Freedom Forest. He was the most photographed person in America, black or white, in the 19th century. He wrote speeches that received standing ovations on both sides of the Atlantic. He wrote books that people across the world understood the barbarity and the cruelty of slavery in new ways. And in addition to his advocacy, he was legit as one of the best writers America has ever produced. He was a champion for freedom, for the freedoms of all American slaves, and for women's suffrage. Frederick Douglass is truly one of the founding fathers of America. Douglass was born Frederick Bailey in Maryland in either 1817 or 1818. His mother was an enslaved woman, and his father was a white man rumored to have been his mother's enslaver. He was separated as an infant from his mother. He saw very little of his mother as a child because he lived on a different plantation about 12 miles away. His mother died when he was only 7 years old, and he was raised by his enslaved grandmother, Betsy Bailey. You know, family separation was one of the most horrific parts of enslavement, and it was not uncommon for enslaved children to be split apart from their parents even at an early age. Let's look at this timeline and turning points in Frederick Douglass' life. In 1818 or 1870, either one, he was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. In 1824, Frederick goes to work at the house of his master, Aaron Anthony, at 7 years old, and he experienced the first horrors of slavery as he witnessed the brutal beating of his aunt by his master, Aaron Anthony. In 1826, by act of providence, Frederick was the only child selected to be sent to work for Hugh Auld in the city of Baltimore. It was here where he was introduced to reading for the first time by Sophie Auld, who was Hugh's wife. In 1831, he accepted Christ as his personal Lord and Savior, and after discovering the importance of reading, he buys his first book, The Columbian Orator. In 1837, Thomas Auld, Frederick's new master, hires him out to slave breaker Edward Covey. In that year, Frederick, at 16 years old, had a famous two-hour fight with Covey that was the major turning point in his life. And then in 1835, he was teaching a Bible study on religious views at the Freedlands farm. Let's look at 1836. In 1836, he attempts to escape, but is put in jail and returned to Hugh Auld. 2 years later, in 1838, Frederick was sent back to Baltimore. He attends the Amy Zion Church and meets a free woman named Anna Murray. She helped him escape dressed as a sailor and then changes his name to Frederick Douglass. He marries Anna Murray and moves to Massachusetts. Then in 1841, he speaks to the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society Convention and becomes so impactful that he was the hired and featured lecturer for abolitionist causes. In 1845, he speaks so eloquently that many doubted that he was a slave. To authenticate his slavery experience, he published a narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. And then he goes to England for safety. In 1846, he travels to Britain, to Ireland, to Scotland, and becomes a huge celebrity for the abolitionist cause. Now, while there, his British friends, led by two white females, raised money to purchase Frederick Douglass's freedom in the United States. In 1847, he moves to Rochester, New York, and starts his own paper, the North Star. 2 years later, in 1848, he speaks at Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls. In 1951, he delivers his famous 4th of July speech at a women's conference, condemning American patriotic and Christian hypocrisy. God, how we need him right now. In 1855, he publishes his second autobiography, My Bondage and My Freedom. In 1860, he campaigns for presidential candidate, then Abraham Lincoln. And in 1962, Frederick becomes an advisor to President Lincoln, insisting that the Civil War be about abolishing slavery and not just able to preserve the Union. In 1863, he recruits black soldiers for the Union Army. Then in 1965, Douglass advocates for birthrights to U.S. citizenship and the 14th Amendment, later voting rights for the 15th Amendment. And then in 1868, he campaigns for presidential candidate, then Ulysses S. Grant. In 1877, he is appointed U.S. Marshal of the District of Columbia. In 1881, he publishes his third autobiography. This was entitled The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. In 1884, he marries his second wife, Helen Pitts. In 1889, he is appointed U.S. Minister to Haiti. And then in 1895, Frederick Douglass dies of a heart attack on February the 20th. Let's look at our Bible application. The Bible, we know, is a book of biographies, a book about people going through real experience in a real world. If you think about it, we look at the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. It's all about the life of Jesus, his biography. And that is why God's people were called Israel, meaning the one who struggles with God and man and triumphs. Why is biographical study important? The Bible portrays all of its characters as authentic and transparent. Each of the men and women is like Elijah, whom the Apostle James described as a man with a nature like ours. And that's in James chapter 5, verse 17a. The benefits of studying biographies. Well, it's a good biography translates truth into life. Historical and theological discussions can be too theoretical. So truth discussed might be valid, but can become sterile and abstract, like plants. Theological truths belong in the dirt. Historical and biblical truth thrives in the soil of real life, where it bursts to life and it blooms and then it bears fruit. Here's some more benefits of the study of biographies. Like Dr. Howard Hendricks challenges his students to incarnate the truth. To incarnate is to make something flesh. Did not Jesus as truth become flesh and dwell among us, as it was recorded in John? And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. It's John chapter 1, verse 14, the New King James Version. So don't hereby discuss truth. Make the truth become living flesh so that others might be drawn to the author of the truth. A good biography creates a closer kinship with people we have admired from a distance. And when we study the life of persons in history, we feel like we've really met that person as a friend. Reverend Clay Calloway talks about a friend of his, Jim Powder, who was trying to explain Jesus to his 5-year-old son. He had difficulty understanding the above invisible concept. His son Danny said, "I need a friend with skin." And if you read the biography with some imagination, placing yourself into the subject, you should begin to feel oneness with him or her, even with someone extraordinary like Frederick Douglass. Biblical prophets like Elijah, or a leader like Moses, or a courageous lady like Harriet Tubman, or a biblical queen like Esther. All of a sudden, you feel a kinship with that individual, a friendship filled with respect and gratitude. A good biography offers stability when you go through similar experiences. So, if you are a student of the life of Frederick Douglass, you realize that you're now, or you're not alone in life's many struggles. In the biblical life of David, you realize you're not alone when you lose a baby son. Maybe you work for an impossible slave whipping master or boss, someone emotionally imbalanced who maintains a position of power in his young teen years. Frederick Douglass served a maniacal overseer named Edward Covey, who became insanely paranoid and haunted his life. This is much like the horrid relationship between David that he had when he served the maniacal king Saul. And maybe you have a strained or estranged relationship with a mother, or as Douglass had did and biblical Esau did. This biography will give insights you may have yourself at odds with. This biography will give insights you may find yourself at odds with a co-worker or perhaps another Christian, like Douglass constantly did in the lives of Barnabas or Paul, who understood toe-to-toe on an issue, each refusing to back down. Douglass was constantly at odds with the hypocritical Christians of this land versus the true, pure Christianity of Christ. A good biography helps us maintain a divine perspective on life. And when we rub shoulders with the person in history or biblical history, we gain a much better view of our circumstances. And it's easy for many of us to worry and feel burdened by failure. We can much better see the providence of God at work in the life of Frederick Douglass and even our own lives. You see, God can and will provide when you have perspective. Here's our conclusion. When we complete this biographical study of Frederick Douglass, hopefully you will accept the following important truths. Truly enlightened thinking builds up the truth that God not only exists, but he is actively governing his creation. Psalm 111 and 10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all those who do his commandments. His praise endures forever." And then Proverbs 1 and 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." The God of the Bible loves you and has been actively involved in your life from the day you were born. And even before that. This is true whether you recognize it or not, or acknowledge it or not. It is true. God has a plan for you. This plan includes blessings greater than your ability to acknowledge. Look at the total area of the life of Frederick Douglass. Here are our 5 closing principles. Our prayer principle: be thankful for the life of Frederick Douglass, and then pray that you remain faithful to God's mission for your life. Then share how God's love has made an impact on your life. Don't be afraid. Tell of the blessings you've received since Christ has come into your life. And even in the area of giving, giving helps support history. Thank you for listening to us, and we ask that you would join us on New Start at St. Stephen, ssclive.org. If you want to be a part of St. Stephen Church, you can call 502-583-6798, extension 0. If you have not made a decision for Christ, but you want to, call us at that number or reach out to us at that website. Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Reverend Geneva Nelson for even trusting me to do this afternoon. I look forward to seeing and hearing from the other teachers as we continue this wonderful Men's Month that we're so excited about. God bless you and God keep you, and happy hump day to all of you, my brothers and sisters, and my family members of St. Stephen Church, and all of you who are listening to this hump day. God bless you and may God keep you is our prayer.